Hello everyone, welcome to the third of these Imagining the Future interviews as part of the Scottish Institute for Enterprises Festival of Innovation. I am Quentin Cooper and it's my pleasure to be with you. If you're watching this live, you've joined us on a very auspicious August day because exactly 29 years ago today, www debuted as a public service on the internet after Tim Berners-Lee rolled out and introduced the world to the whole idea of the World Wide Web. If you're not watching us live, well, obviously that date stuff doesn't apply, but hello anyway. Don't worry about the date significance because today it's more about the data significance. In about a minute or so, I'm going to be chatting with the co-founder and CEO of sports data company Playerdata, Roy Hotrabhvanon. Now, what he does, how he got to do it, how he's hoping to do it more of it and better, and should make for, I think, a really fascinating conversation. But it's also one that you can all be part of too, because we're going to have time at the end for your questions and your comments. And you'll see that little box in the middle bottom of your screen, Q&A, as you probably know by now. Just go there, put a question, put a comment. Can do that anytime. We'll gather them all up, and we've got Scott McKellar here from SIE who's going to then feed us back to us at the end of the day. Right, all clear? Then we will crack on and say hello to Roy Hotrabhvanon, who joins us from, where are you joining us from, Roy?
Dalkeith, Scotland.
Dalkeith, marvellous. Now we're going to get onto your particular story in a moment, but I think we probably ought to begin by saying a little bit about sports data, because obviously there's all kinds of sports data out there. A league table is sports data. The height of a centre back is sports data. What are you interested in?
We're interested in biometrics. We're interested in body positioning, heart rate, temperature, technique, things that we can help athletes train and use to improve their performance. Anything around that. We're not too interested in the whole sort of we'll call it more metadata side of things around the league tables and the scores, but we're looking at the athlete and how they're performing.
So are you more about getting reliable biometric data, or are you also about analyzing that data?
Our core thesis as Playerdata is kind of both of those, but the core goal is to build the best user experience possible. So to present the user with the easiest and digestible information so that they can use that to improve.
Yeah, there's no point presumably getting a load of figures and you know, only if you've got a calculator and 14 hours and a professor of physics with you can you explain that actually this is what you need to long jump 2 centimeters further.
Exactly.
Now, obviously, you can get a lot of data on athletes remotely. You can do that by making measurements before the event. You can film them or whatever it is. But if you really want to get key data, you need to have stuff on them, don't you? You need to get that what they're doing as they're doing it, and that comes down to wearable technology.
Exactly, and that's where when we founded, 3-4 years ago now, that was the core USP, is that, you know, all your wearable devices out there, your Apple Watches, your Fitbits, they are wearables, but they gave you a very, very small piece of the data. They gave you your heart rate, your speed, your acceleration. And it was very difficult for the athletes to actually use that data to improve the performance because they couldn't analyze the biggest thing that affects performance, which is your technique. Yeah. So what we do is we've built sensors that are woven into the garments themselves that will take your body position, display in 3D, and we can analyze that. And now we have your technique to analyze, process, and tell you how you can improve.
But presumably you've got to factor in what you cannot have in a kind of Heisenbergian way. You can't have the act of measuring interfering significantly with the performance. Otherwise, no athlete's going to wear that stuff, even probably in training.
Absolutely. I mean, that's where we come back to user experience. User experience doesn't just cover the user consuming the data and being able to understand the data. It goes down and covers how the athlete interfaces with the product. It has to be seamless and not interfere with the user. So we spent a lot of time working such that the sensors are woven in the garments such that when an athlete puts on the shirt, they don't notice the difference.
Yeah. And that's a key point, is it? Because even if it doesn't, but they think it does, and they don't have faith, you've got a problem. So there is a diplomatic element to this as well. Okay,
Yeah, absolutely.
so so when you've got that, what sort of things you can measure? Almost anything. Presumably, you've then got to distinguish between things that seem important and things that actually are. It might just be something about posture turns out to be much more significant than something about, I don't know, aerobic capacity.
Yeah, so the metrics that we we highlight are done on a sector by sector basis. So I'll use one of our upcoming products as an example. We are working on a product in cycling whereby an athlete will be wearing one of our motion capture shirts. In cycling, the biggest thing they care about is anything that will affect their power output and how the power output translates to the wheel. One of the things that we can do with our technology is look at drag and how the body and the body position correlates to the drag in real time. So with cycling, we use our technology to estimate drag for the athlete and inform them in real time whether they're in a high drag position so they can correct it. With other sports, we'll be focusing on different things.
What happens when something you're telling an athlete conflicts with something that their coach or trainer is telling them? Because obviously you're only of use if you're telling them something in addition to what a coach or trainer is. If you're just backing them up, you're not gaining. But if you're contradicting them, you're running into conflict.
That's a really good question. We haven't had too many examples of that so far because we very, very much work in partnership with the coaches to make sure that we're all on the same page, and we really present our data from the viewpoint that this is data, and the it's a coach's job and responsibility to try to interpret it and take action on it. And we're not trying to replace the coach here. We're trying to work with them and arm them with the most data possible, so the coach can go to the athlete and educate them. Look, you were slower in this sector because your body position was like this, and to improve that, you need to make X, Y, Z adjustments.
What about variables that it must be harder to measure because they're not taking place during the performance? But if you've got an athlete who's, incredibly fit, has a natural great body, but they're actually up half the night playing PlayStation 4 games, that's going to have a serious effect on their performance.
We actually capture that side of things as well. So we built as part of that, we built a wellness sort of recording program which allows coaches to customize a survey that they send out to the athletes that they fill in every morning and rate. Okay, I've slept on scale 1 to 10. How well did I recover from the last training session? How well did I sleep? And we get all those metrics and we can compare them to performance output. So we capture the sort of mental side of things, which is largely overlooked, as well as the physical, to get a whole complete picture.
Right, and then presumably you've also got to get that your information reaches them along with what the coach is saying, the sports nutritionist is saying, the team manager is saying, the medical team, if they're at that level, is saying. How do you make sure that yours is phrased in a way that it will be easy to be appreciated and interpreted and acted on by the individuals?
We haven't solved this problem in particular yet because we go through the coaches at the moment. So we present the data to the coaches, and it's the coaches' job to act on it. This is something we're actively doing research in. Okay, how do we present athletes data to athletes directly without confusing them and creating a potential conflict between the coach and the user?
Yeah. Okay. Now we've kind of raced. It's entirely my doing, but we've kind of raced straight to the finishing line here and got to what this is all about. But I want to go back. I want to take you right back to the starting blocks and where this all began. This is Edinburgh University 8 years ago. So what were you up to, and how did this come about?
Oh God, that's a long time ago.
It is for you. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Yeah.
I joined Edinburgh University in 2012 to do computer science electronics, and at that point in my in my life, I'd never done a sport in my life before. I came from Thailand where it was very hot, and I'm proud to say I was a typical geek. Stayed inside, read books, played video games.
Okay, that's a very good picture of you 8 years ago. Fine.
Joined Edinburgh University, had the opportunity at the sports fair to pick something and try something new. So I worked down the list alphabetically. American football wasn't for me, so I picked archery, and I fell in love with it. Absolutely fell in love with it. The only problem was I was rubbish, and because archery is a niche sport, there wasn't that much help around to help me improve. So I wanted to see if I could leverage my skill in computer science electronics to see if I could do something and build some sort of sensors that would help me improve my performance. So I embarked on that journey. A year and a half, 2 years down the line, I come up with. I've been training myself and progressively building a system that would give me feedback to my performance, and I would use that to train myself. And I had done so successfully with it that I went from a beginner to competing internationally for Scotland and competing internationally for Thailand, my home country. And was on track to go to the 2016 Olympics for Thailand.
This is extraordinarily fast progress from I don't know one end of a bow from the other to I'm nearly in the Olympic squad.
Yeah, it was. It didn't feel at the time, 2 years is a long time at that point. But yeah, unfortunately, I didn't get to go. There was a car accident, but that's another story. And I didn't get to go to the Olympics. So at that point, I was at my final year university. I went, well, nobody's ever going to believe me. I'm only one data point. It could be a fluke. So I took what I built, picked a complete beginner, someone who never picked up a bow, and trained her using the tech. She went from never having picked up a bow to competing for Scotland in 6 months, beating my own record. That's when we realized two things. One, there was something here, and we've hit on, something that could potentially help a lot of people. And two, there's no money in archery to commercialize it. So
and when you say we, it's probably worth saying who the we is, because this is Hayden, isn't it? Your other co-founder.
Yeah. So Hayden, we were on a course together, electronics and computer science, and because it was a very specific course, only 10 or 13 people on the course. So Hayden and I have become very, very, very close friends over the years. And it happened that Hayden was working on something different, but still in the wearable space at the same time as me. He was working on an ECG monitoring suit. So we decided, okay, let's combine the two. They're a natural fit for each other. And we've been doing that ever since.
And at what point did you begin to realize, hang on, this isn't, you've figured out it doesn't just work for me in archery, it can work for this other woman as well. When did you begin to think, hang on, and not just archery and not just individuals, and begin to realize the full scale of the potential of what you were doing?
It started really when I kind of started to explain to more outside people of like the core technology that we built, the motion capture sensors built into clothing, allowing you to capture a 3D model. And then these people will just, without any prompting, will go, oh, you could use that in running to look at gait. Oh, you could use that in rowing to look at that. And that's when we sort of knew, okay, we're onto something. There's a lot of markets that we can go into with this technology. We haven't pitched anything yet, and decided to look at a few of them to see what we could do.
And this took, it's always the way when you're talking to somebody at the point where they've got a success story behind them, it always seems like a logical and natural progression. But there was a lot of long hours, there was a lot of blood, sweat and tea involved in getting to where you got to. You, I think, left your masters, to focus on this full time.
Yeah, there came a point whereby I was halfway through my masters and we had an offer of funding from a group of angel investors, but £250,000 to kickstart the business. Hayden at the time was working at Free Agent full-time as a software developer, and we went, well, we've got the money on the table to do this. We've got some security here. Do you want to do it? And we haven't looked back.
You haven't looked back, but you nearly went back, because I think in 2018 you reached a point that you thought might be the big chance to showcase this to the world, but it did not go so well.
Yeah, so that was the Homeless World Cup in at the end of 2018 was where we basically started working from a year after receiving that initial investment on V1 of Playerdata's product, and we decided, okay, we could do something good and also showcase that technology in one go by partnering with the Homeless World Cup, who are also based in Edinburgh, and they had their event in Mexico that year. So we decided we're going to use our technology to live stream data from the athletes to the spectators and create much better spectator engagement. Spent a year developing the technology and tested it in Edinburgh. Worked fine, worked perfectly. Flew over to Mexico, and it didn't work because of the technical reason for why it didn't work was that there were a lot of people, and a lot of people using Wi-Fi meant that our units just couldn't connect to Wi-Fi.
Right, you didn't have the bandwidth.
We didn't have the bandwidth, and what happened was we didn't design the product such that it could not work live. So we ended up collecting very little and no data, and for that was it was a complete disaster at the time. But it unearthed quite a couple of issues that would have bitten us if we were to take that product and scaled, gone to market, started selling it. Is that this problem would have came about anyway in about a year and a half time, and we would have to fix it.
You thought you were ready to go to market, and actually this showed you weren't. So there is a big positive comes out of this, but in a very hard way.
Yeah. So at that point, we had 6 months runway left, and we went, well, we kind of have to rebuild the whole product in 6 months. There's a time clock to it. And it was a sort of do or die moment for Playerdata. If we didn't build it in 6 months, that's it. We wouldn't have gotten any extra funding. Why would we? We didn't have a product. And it was a very tough 6 months, but I'm pleased to say that we came out of it a lot stronger, and it was the right decision to make as well. Because we could have gone, look, we'll just kick the can down the road and ship a product that will have issues down the road, but it wasn't the right thing to do.
Yeah. Anything else with hindsight that you learned the hard way that you wish somebody had been able to kind of tap you on the shoulder in 2012 or 2014 and say, do this or don't do this?
Oh, it's the thing with like these sort of questions is that there's a lot of little things that you learn along the way, but there aren't any big things that come to mind with that. You know, there's a lot of little things around, how do you, very menial things like how do you file a tax return? How do you do the accounts? How do you present to investors? A lot of things that you will learn along the way that will become part of your skill set. And at the time, it actually feels like quite a big thing, is because it's an unknown to you as an entrepreneur. So the only advice I could give to that is stick it through. There are lots of people you can ask for advice and help, and people have gone through this journey before and can advise.
Maybe the first time for you, but others have trod this path already. So don't be afraid to go to people, and that's what SIE and other organizations can help with as well. Now, if you look at your website now, it says our mission is to provide affordable technology that enables teams to train like professionals. Now, I'm intrigued as to why you decided to focus on teams rather than individuals, and why you chose to focus on amateurs, clearly, rather than professionals.
So first part of your question, we started to focus on teams because as a small team ourselves, we realized that going B2B, business to business, would be a lot easier from a support perspective than going business to consumer directly. The simple math of it is that a team has 20 players, but your point of contact is a coach. So we can get 20 players, but we only have to deal with the coach from a support perspective. And it makes it a lot easier when you're growing and you're going through the scale-up phase of where you're going to have teething problems in your process to deal with it and manage expectations of clients. And the second point is something that I'm really passionate about, actually coming up through Archery. So when I was coming up through Archery, I saw the divide between the haves and the have-not in sports. So as you go up the scale, you get progressively more and more support and more technology. And I wasn't really happy with that, because the elite in sport have all the toys to play with, whereas the amateurs who have the same level of passion and drive want to have a higher barrier to entry because they don't have that level of support. So we focused on building Playerdata as a technology for all outfit, whilst building a sustainable business model that will support me and my team. We wanted to make our technology accessible financially, and also from a data perspective, easy to use and understand. It's something I'm very passionate about.
But if you're actually now in this sector and it's an unusual sector to be in order obviously to partly to make money. Sport's an odd one because there are millions of people participating in sport and organizing things, doing it for nothing or next to nothing. And at the other end of the scale, there are people making millions of pounds and millions of pounds floating around in elite sport. So trying to come up with the right kind of funding model must be tricky.
Yeah, it's definitely it was quite difficult to get the pricing model such that we couldn't we could capture as much as possible whilst building a sustainable business for Playerdata. A lot of it, I think that approaching this problem from a student's perspective was one of the things that got us there. Is that myself and Hayden, when we started Playerdata, we operated on a shoestring. We had 50 quid each, and we started with a whole budget mindset, and that whole budget mindset translated through the whole process of building up Playerdata. Is that, we're going to keep costs low. We're not going to spend on frills. We're going to make the product as accessible as possible. We can do X, Y, and Z to keep the cost low, and that's how we've achieved that.
Right, but you were never at any point tempted to think, well, why don't we direct this where the big bucks are? We're going to go and offer our services to a Premier League team or whatever else it is, and they're going to pay us £2 million, and we're going to slightly improve the number of points they gain over a season. I mean, new manager at Rangers, Stephen Gerrard, he might have snapped you up.
Doesn't fit with what we want to do. Doesn't fit with our vision. I mean, and we want to cater from amateur sports all the way to elite, and we can still cater for elite. We'll charge them the same thing that we charge the amateurs. But because the elite guys have bigger budgets, our sell to them is, look, instead of getting 10, just kitting out your first team and your second team for the amount you currently pay, spend that money and kit out your entire squadron down to your academy, and you have full data coverage. It works. The model works from amateur to elite, for us and them.
So where are you at now? What scale are we at, and what's looming on the horizon?
We are, so this time last year we were 4 people, and about a couple of weeks ago we celebrated our 3rd birthday, and we are now 14. So we're a team of 14, and we started selling our V1 product in January, and we're now up at 40 clubs sold to this year. And we're looking to launch our first individual product in partnership with a large garment manufacturer sometime next year. We're very much looking forward to expanding into team sports because we're targeting the amateurs to semi-pros. There's a much larger market for us to go and help, and we look to expand through the rest of Scotland and down to England.
Now, I'm going to throw it open to questions and comments in a second, but just a couple of last ones from me. I have an old saying of mine, which is nothing blunts like the cutting edge. Are you wary that the fact that you can't ever rest on your laurels, you've got to keep looking at new technology because there'll be somebody else who's doing what you do and coming in and trying to do it more?
Oh, always aware. Always aware. And the way that we tackle that is we constantly innovate across the technology stack at Playerdata, from a software and a process perspective, but also a hardware perspective. It's a lot harder to innovate on the hardware because that usually takes a lot of time. So what we've done is that we've started bringing on interns from Edinburgh University we work with at the moment. We have a couple of interns at Edinburgh University who are passionate about this, to start looking at projects that may not land for another year or 2 years, but they're starting to work on it. They're starting to learn about it, and it's our way of keeping ahead of the curve whilst being able to, the main development team being able to fully focus on what we're offering at the moment.
And finally, for me, as well as the technology, what is it you think you do well that maybe other startups don't always remember to do? It's like last week we were talking here and to Suzanne Mitchka from Citrus Labs, and she said they were very good at listening to what customers want rather than telling them what they thought they should need.
We are also good at that. We pride ourselves on knowing our customers intimately, knowing what they want, knowing what they tick. But I think the thing that's helped actually us grow Playerdata over the last year so quickly is our internal process and how we operate. We've focused very strongly on building a very developer friendly environment, somewhere where we can innovate quickly, safely, and deploy quickly to customers. And that has allowed us to take on six engineers in the last year without taking a complete hit from a R&D output. And we've had actually developers come from much larger tech companies with hundreds, 200 employees come and look at our internal infrastructure and process and go, wow, you're a team of 5 and the last place didn't have this. Everything is automated here. Everything, we very much focus on getting our teams to only focus on the hard problems, because that's where they should spend their time.
And clearly from your backdrop today, as you talk, you're still able to work away even when you're at home. So you're always struggling to improve things. Now, I'm going to hand over now to Scott McKellar, Marketing and Comms Manager at SIE. And he has been harnessing and gathering your questions and comments as they've been coming in. And we're going to squeeze in, well, at least a few of them before we run out of time. Scott.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, we've got, we don't have a terrific amount of time left. So I'll fit in as many questions as we can. So jumping right in, one of the ones we've had in are, Roy, what are the key components of the Playerdata team? You mentioned it's a team of 5, going up to team 14, but is it data science? Is it sports knowledge, physio, AI?
Every member of my team is important to the company and our success. But the most important people to our process is our chief account manager, who is also a sports scientist, who captures all the customer side of things. Our designer, who then takes that, distills down the important things, and comes up with something that's user-friendly. And Hayden, the tech lead, who then has to figure out how to make it. That is the 3 core pillars of my process. And my job, I'm entirely replaceable, but my job is to make sure that machine runs smoothly.
Don't say that on the record, Roy.
So next up is user experience an integral part of your successful development, or is the technology the priority?
User experience for me always comes first before technology, because you can have really fancy technology. If it's hard to use, nobody's going to use it. That's what it really boils down to, is that we have to build for user experience first. And if you can combine user experience with difficult to use technology, then that's where you get your innovation and your edge.
Yep. We've still got time for a couple more questions. How did investors get to know about you and your idea? You mentioned there was obviously quite a lot of funding opportunities there, but how did they get to know about you?
I like to say luck, but I'm a strong believer that the more you go out there and talk to people, you kind of just create opportunities. And all I did was go out, went to networking events, talk to people who then knew people who then introduced me to more people, and it was just went through the network, just went out and talked to as many people as I could and tell my story.
But did it also help as well that you clearly radiate passion? I can imagine you're talking to somebody in funding because you are convinced, you're more likely to convince somebody else. Whereas I've seen other people when they talk, and even when it's something brilliant, they sound like they don't quite appreciate how amazing it is themselves. You've got to have that bit of the sense of, I'm telling you about something wonderful here.
Yes, and absolutely. And investors, that's what investors look for. That's what people look for. That's what your customers look for. And that's actually one of the things that I wrote in my article, is that don't go and start a company because you think it's a good idea or you think it's cool. Find something that you're passionate about. Find problems in that space, and channel that passion into solving those problems, and you will go very far. Being an entrepreneur is a combination of 2 things: passion and hard work. If you can do both, if you have both, you'll find the way.
Yeah. We've got time for just a couple more questions, I think, but
if you're fast.
Yeah, a very topical one. How is COVID-19 impacting your business positive or negative? Anything to report on?
Obviously, lots of our business is reliant on team sports being able to happen. And at the start of COVID-19, we thought, okay, great, now we have to push back our sales forecast for 6-8 months. We're not going to sell anything for 8 months, but it's actually been the opposite. What's happened is that clubs with a lot more, who had lots of money, who have restricted budgets are going, oh, okay, let's look at alternative options to player tracking, and they found us. So we're actually on track for our pre-COVID projections, which is incredible for us. Operationally, before COVID, we worked from home 1 day a week, so we just switched to working from home all days a week. It wasn't that difficult.
Brilliant. Scott, sorry to jump in there, but I think that will have to be the last question, because I've done a full data analysis and I've looked at the clock and we are kind of out of time. So can we please give a huge thanks to Roy Hotrabhvanon, co-founder and CEO of Sports Data, for crunching your ideas and some data with us as well. And also to Scott for fielding all your questions. Next week at 12:30, our guest is David Townsend from Town Rock Energy. They're based in Aberdeen, so he may be in heavy duty lockdown, but that doesn't stop him from joining us. And we can talking about renewing our thinking on renewable energy. So that's 12:30 a week today for those watching live, or for those who aren't watching live, 12:30 on August the 13th. I hope to be seen by you there.